In the last episode of A&N In Depth, we talked to Steve Apollo about Adventist publishing. In this episode, we won't talk about the mechanics anymore and who sells the books and who distributes the books. No, we're going to be talking about something different. What is the impact of those books? What is the impact of the magazines? So Adventist publishing has been around for 174 years. Was it worth it? What impact did we have? And today we have, again, Steve Apollo and A&N In Depth to talk about that. Steve, welcome again.
Thank you.
Why do we distribute books, and what impact do you think we're having?
We distribute books because this is our mandate, to spread literature like leaves of autumn.
Where does that come from, that expression?
This is an expression that was used by Ellen White when she had the vision in 1848. And she told her husband, I have been told you must begin to print. This is a mandate from God that through the printing press, through the published message, the message would spread. As we said before, this was the technology of the time, and this was the best method that God would use.
So let's set that scene a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen White had just started her prophetic ministries.
Yeah.
Okay, so Seventh-day Adventists believe that God spoke through Ellen White specific messages for the Seventh-day Adventist Church so that we could establish ourselves to fulfill the mission that he had given us. Mm-hmm. And there is a vision about publishing, and she turned to, how old is she at this point?
She's still a teenager, I believe. I think 1848, 19?
Yeah, about that. And
Yeah.
if it's not a teenager, it's definitely early 20s.
Yeah.
And her husband was not that much older.
No.
So here you have a couple that is in their early 20s. They must have seen that this is new technology. So they couldn't have been surprised that God is telling them to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I know is they were not equipped at that time to start publishing. Maybe this was the farthest thing from their minds, which made God give her the vision to do this. But I don't think this started with them, because if you look at the story of William Miller, it was the same thing. He was a little shy about spreading the gospel until, what's his name?
Joshua Himes.
Joshua Himes comes to him and says, if you're really serious about this message, let's spread it. Then they started publishing the message. And so this is carried on to the time of Ellen and James White and the Adventists. So when they begin this, they are still poor. They don't have enough money. They do not have capital to get this done. So they do it themselves. They borrow some money, have the first publication printed in 1849, which we are celebrating 175 years next year. And they take it out. And God says, once you start distributing, he will bring people that will give you donations, and they will give you money, and the ministry will grow. And it grew from there.
So you have to take the first step.
You have to take the first step of faith.
It's still the same today, you know. In
Yes.
every new technology, there's always somebody willing
Yes.
to take that step of faith.
It was done with a lot of sacrifice, sleepless nights. James White had to do some manual work to be able to raise some money to get the printing done.
Her vision described publishing as distributing literature across the world as the leaves of autumn.
Streams of light across the globe.
That's another.
Yes.
That's the vision, in fact.
Yeah.
And you've been trying to do that since. What impact has it had?
It has had great impact. As we said last week, in a lot of the continents around the world, the work started with the printing work. Somebody went somewhere with literature and started distributing it. And so all over the world today, in the places where we have Adventist presence, whenever you ask somebody, how did it start? Significantly, you hear of a work done by a literature evangelist. If we had time, we would look at some of the stories. One of them is Australia, the story of the Kent family in Ugora. Another is South America. Another is Mexico. You go to China, you have Abraham Leroux. Uh, you have people that gave themselves to go out and do this on a volunteer basis. They were not sent by the church. Many of them just decided to go.
And that's the sales front. But we also distribute millions of books. Who's reading those books, and what impact do you think we have? Because you talked about individual impact. Quite frankly, if individuals were not being transformed by this literature, they wouldn't buy it anymore, and it would be over a long time ago. So clearly, whatever it is that we're publishing is impacting people's lives, and it is transforming millions of people. But what about the collective? Have these books, do you think, played a part in shaping society in some way?
I think it has. You look at the growth of the work in, let me take an example in Africa. Africa has one of the largest growing Adventist population. But again, when you look at the literature ministry going on there, it's also among the largest that's taking place. So there is some significance of the literature work in terms of the growth of membership. But I do not just want to look at it in terms of growth and in the numbers, because the literature ministry is not a harvesting occasion. Basically, we say what the literature evangelist does is they come in, they plant the seed, and then when the evangelist, the preaching evangelist comes, it's a harvesting season. So we think of it more in terms of planting a seed, but there have been seeds that have been planted all over the world. There is a connection between where the literature ministry is doing well and the growth of church membership.
Tell me more.
South America, Inter-America, those are some of the largest and fastest growing divisions. But also you look at the connection with literature work, that's places where they have the best literature work taking place. Let me give you a simple example. In South America, for example, Brazil, your country.
Yes.
You have one of the best and the largest student programs. More than half of the students that go canvassing in the globe, 10,000, come from your division. So, and this is the division that now is producing the most missionaries around the world. There's a very close correlation. There's a correlation between this.
Well, if people have the resilience to go to sell books constantly, it is one of the hardest things I've ever done.
They have the resilience.
They can do anything, Steve.
That's right. They have the resilience. They build a connection with God, and they see the need for mission and missionary work. This is what the ministry does. So, as I've said, let's go to Asia, look at countries like Philippines in SSD. One of the largest literature work or ministry happens there. Next to South America and to Africa is SSD, the Southern Asia Division.
Southern Asia Pacific.
Southern Asia Pacific Division. They have more than just 2,000 regular literature evangelists. In the country of Philippines alone, that's where the majority of them come from. But again, you look at Adventist presence, growing very fast. So I would say, if anybody looked at this, there is a correlation between the literature work and the growth of church membership. And I know I might be stretching it here a little bit because I haven't done the study, and somebody might say, maybe there are other things that are related to this. But for me, it's a simple connection. Where there is literature ministry, there is a passion for mission work, there is a love for mission work, there is a connection with God, and there is a growth, because this is something that Ellen White was shown, that our literature, the work of our literature, is to make clear our message as Seventh-day Adventists.
There is something tangible about holding the words in your hands that you don't get with screens. So there's something about holding a book.
Yes.
What matters is the thoughts and the content of that book, but it is a different experience to read than it is to listen or to watch. Personally, I'm a very slow reader. It takes me about 3 minutes to go through a book, but I can listen at 1.7, 1.9.
Did you say 3 minutes?
About 3 minutes for a page, yes.
Okay, page, okay.
Per page, not a book, per
okay.
page.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes my mom and I were, quite some time ago, we were reading together, and it was just faster to read silently, and then we'll discuss what we're reading. It was embarrassing. She was finished, and then she was waiting, and I was still 2/3 through, and then finally I finished.
I have the same challenge.
Every page is the same. At some point I thought I had some form of dyslexia. Even when I write by hand, sometimes I write the last words before the last letters of a word before the first letters. And it's a very odd thing. Sometimes I'm writing on a board as in some process of ideation. And if, let's say I would write your name, Steve, I would just jump through the S, the T, and the E, and I would just start on the N, and it will go. You see, it's very strange. But listening is faster for me. So I listen to the equivalent of 2 books a week for the last 7 years or so. And so I love the content itself. And yet, when I pick up a book, especially if it's well designed, if the material feels good, if it's, the font is spot on, and you have the distribution within the pages and all the art that goes into publishing. When I'm holding this in my hand, it feels like it's real. It's more real than just listening to somebody read it to me.
And it's not just the holding, Sam. Why do you think people have bookshelves in their rooms with all these books even though they're not reading them? Just the fact that they are seeing the books there, and sometimes being able to touch the book, it makes a big difference. I think there's something. Humans are tactile. I would say that we love to touch and feel things. Let me use a simple example of food. Yeah, when you see a picture of a food, it looks very well presented. It's really nice and it's really appealing. But when you smell it and feel the texture, you're going to a whole new level.
Correct.
A whole new level. 3D, 4D. I think having a book in your hand, touching the pages, feeling it, and not just that, marking it out, it makes a difference. When you have a Bible that you have marked out and you've been reading over a long period of time, if somebody were to ask you about a text, you would easily open the page with the text, not because you know exactly where it is, but because just the fact that you've marked it out, your brain does some connections to that. It's different to when you're reading the Bible in your phone or in a tablet. You can mark it out and everything, but somehow that connection is not there. With the Bible, you can put your finger in the middle and kind of estimate where the page is and very quickly open that. How do you do that with a tablet or with a phone?
You're right. I struggle with Kindle. In my PhD, I buy all the books that on Kindle if I can help it. And You change the font in any way, and suddenly nothing is where it was.
Exactly.
There is a certain temporality to everything. Everything is
Yes.
temporal. Nothing is
Mhm.
stable.
Mhm.
But a book, it will be there where you left it.
It will be there where you left it.
It won't change. That's interesting.
And let me add another aspect, which lately we've been exploring. And this is, we've been exploring the fact that prophetically we believe that a time will come when there'll be censorship.
What?
Everything will be censored.
Censorship.
Censorship.
You can't be serious.
Well,
Waiting for it. Censorship. It doesn't have.
well, it's already happening.
I don't want to go into
It's-
sarcasm. I don't like sarcasm, but it
Yeah.
is happening.
It
I
is
see it
already
happening.
It's already
all the time,
happening.
everywhere.
I was looking at a UN report about countries that are being censored. The percentage of the population around the world that's not able to receive information either on the internet or radio or TV. It's a huge population. But if somebody had a book, no matter what censorship was done, they would still keep the book in their home. They would still get access to that information.
It's a lot harder to remove books from people
It is.
than it is
Than to just cut off.
turn down change the DNS of a website or remove a video.
That's
or
right. This is why we say we must continue to print. Because we know a time will come when the only access to information you'll have is what you have in your hand. And we think of this work as planting seeds. In Kenya, I think this is a little funny. In Kenya, the literature evangelists have this saying in Kiswahili. I'll say it and then I'll translate it for you. They say, tega bomu ilipuke baadaye. They say, plant a bomb and it will explode later. Meaning that just leave the message in the home. The results will come out later.
It's a devastating concept, but I got it.
Yes, it is.
I like the seed better than the bomb.
Yes.
But it works.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the content itself, okay? So, which is the point of the publishing? We have been trying to help people understand the Bible so they can have an encounter with Jesus who will bring them freedom, healing, and hope. That's our promise, that we can help people understand the Bible. And to a large degree, every book we publish is trying to help people understand some aspect of the Bible, even if it is on health or family relationships or whatever other subject you can buy a book about. It is in some way helping people understand the Bible. More directly, the understanding of the Bible has to do with people's futures. So we don't just care for people to become healthier here. We want them to become healthier here as an anticipation of the eternity that they will spend as healthy human beings. We want them to have better relationships here, not just so that they can die happier forever. No, but that they can experience those joyful relationships in eternal life. And God has some special messages in the book of Revelation, namely Revelation 14, that brings the three angels' messages. And much of our books are dedicated to helping people understand what that means, in fact. Next week, we're going to be talking to the director of your department, Almir, about the Great Controversy book. We're distributing millions of copies of this book across the world this year and next year. How important is it for people's understanding of the Bible that we continue printing?
The work of our literature is to explain the Bible and to explain the basis of our beliefs. A lot of people claim not to understand the Bible when they just read it off as it is. Our books are commentaries of the Bible. They explain things in depth. They make things clearer in simple language. They connect the dots that people are not able to connect when they just read the Bible as it is. Whether it is health books or family books, because they are all scripture oriented, putting principles found in scripture into everyday life situations. This is what our literature does.
Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam.
And thank you for listening to A&N In Depth. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to comment and ask questions. I'm sure Steve will love to answer them directly here in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Our next episode would be with Almir Maroney. He is the director of the Department of Publishing for the Seventh-day Adventist World Church. And we'll be talking to him about a book distribution, perhaps the largest in human history, on the Great Controversy books that have been written by Ellen White. And if you are interested in that, there will be some controversial questions asked about why so much money spent on distributing books. So if you're interested in that, we'll see you in the next episode.